French President Emmanuel Macron is expected to name a new prime minister after days of political deadlock triggered by the ousting of Michel Barnier by the parliament.
At least 25 Palestinians have been killed and dozens of others wounded in an Israeli airstrike on central Gaza. Officials at two hospitals said they'd received the bodies of those killed in the strike, which hit a residential building in the Nuseirat refugee camp. Palestinian medics also reported that over 40 people, most of them children, were receiving treatment at both hospitals. Al-Aqsa Hospital said that the Israeli attack also damaged several nearby houses. That strike came just hours after US President Joe Biden's national security advisor raised hopes about a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas that would end the war in the Strip. Israel is trying to eliminate Hamas, which led the attack on southern Israel in October 2023 that sparked the war in Gaza. At least 1,200 people were killed and around 250 others taken hostage in that incursion. Gaza's health ministry says over 44,800 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza, more than half of them women and children. But the ministry doesn't differentiate between civilians and combatants in its count.
A new prime minister is expected to be named in France this Friday as President Emmanuel Macron returns to Paris after a visit to Poland. The visit to Warsaw on Thursday came amid a wait back home by both Macron's political allies and rivals to appoint a new government chief. Prime Minister Michel Barnier resigned last week following a historic no-confidence vote prompted by budget disputes. Barnier's ousting by Parliament after only 3 months in office pushed France into a fresh crisis. According to local reports, a final meeting by President Macron this Friday with party leaders at the Élysée Palace is expected to result in the announcement of a new prime minister and bring an end to days of political deadlock.
Just days after the fall of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime, European Home Affairs ministers are discussing what fate awaits the thousands of Syrian refugees in Europe. European Commissioner for Internal Affairs and Migration Magnus Brunner says that while voluntary returns are encouraged, it is too soon to discuss deportations. Austria's Interior Minister, on the other hand, wants to start preparing for such a scenario as soon as possible.
Wir müssen jetzt Dinge vorbereiten, die notwendig sind. Einerseits Verfahren aussetzen und dann in weiterer Folge jetzt schon vorzubereiten, Rückführungen und Abschieben. Da kann man nicht warten, da muss man arbeiten.
On the other hand, Karner's German counterpart Nancy Faeser echoed Brunner in wanting to await how the situation in Syria unfolds. She also emphasized the important contributions Syrian refugees have made to her country.
Ich will aber auch noch mal betonen, die Menschen, die in Deutschland arbeiten, aus Syrien, bei uns einen wichtigen Beitrag beispielsweise in der Gesundheitsinstitutionen leisten, als Pflegekräfte oder auch als Ärzte. Wir haben eine Menge Ärzte aus Syrien auch in Deutschland. Die können gerne auch in Deutschland bleiben und sind uns willkommen, solange sie die Gesetze achten und bei uns arbeiten.
Germany has welcomed more Syrian refugees than any other EU country in recent years, but some conservative hardliners are now calling for their return.
A delegation from the European Parliament has visited Georgia and marched with pro-EU protesters. That comes as demonstrations against the government's decision to suspend accession talks are now in a second week. Police have reportedly resorted to more heavy-handed tactics in a bid to clamp down on the unrest, with more than 400 protesters detained and at least 100 treated for injuries. The ruling Georgian Dream retained control of parliament in the disputed 26th of October elections. The opposition accused the governing party of rigging the vote with the help of neighbouring Russia to keep what they call the Moscow-friendly Georgian Dream in power. But the protests against the election took on a new dimension after the Georgian Dream's decision on the 28th of November to put EU accession talks on hold until 2028. That decision was in response to a European Parliament resolution that criticised the elections as neither free nor fair. International observers say they saw instances of violence, bribery and double voting at the polls, prompting some EU lawmakers to demand a rerun. Hundreds of protesters have staged a rally outside Serbia's state television headquarters in Belgrade as the wave of demonstrations against the government of Alexander Vučić continues to grow. The protesters say they're angry that RTS television is carrying Vučić's allegations that the students were paid by the West to overthrow his government. They brought improvised money bags to the headquarters of RTS, which has been accused of spreading the nationalist pro-government narrative for years. Classes at more than 40 university faculties throughout Serbia have been suspended for days. The protests initially erupted last month after a concrete canopy collapsed at a railway station in the northern city of Novi Sad, killing 15 people. Many in Serbia blame the canopy collapse on rampant corruption in the country that led to sloppy renovation work at the station building. The disaster has become a flashpoint for broader dissatisfaction with the president's increasingly autocratic rule, reflecting public demands for democratic changes. Almost daily protests have been held since the 1st of November in Novi Sad, Belgrade and other cities across Serbia, which have sometimes turned violent.
NATO's Secretary-General Mark Rutte wants NATO countries to increase defence spending well beyond the 2% of GDP to which they are now committed. To this end, he has asked citizens to help put pressure on their governments and even make sacrifices.
Your politicians need to listen to your voices. Tell them you accept to make sacrifices today so that we can stay safe tomorrow. Tell them they need to spend more on defence so that we can continue to live in peace.
For example, Rutte believes that cuts will have to be made in pensions, healthcare and security systems in order to increase defence spending.
If we don't spend more together now to prevent war, we will pay a much higher price later to fight it. Not billions, but trillions of euros.
Rutte has argued that NATO faces a threat equal to or greater than the Cold War. Romania and Bulgaria finally received the green light on Thursday to become full members of the passport-free Schengen area. This breakthrough was made possible after Austria agreed to lift its long-held veto on the accession of the two Eastern European countries, which was initially due to concerns about migration. In practice, the deal means the abolition of checks at internal land borders, although some checks will still remain.
Although practically they will be fully members by the start of 2025. There will be some internal border controls placed by Hungary at the Romanian border, and then also in the border between Bulgaria and Romania for at least 6 months.
The Schengen area is experiencing a delicate period, with at least 8 countries reintroducing temporary internal border checks, one after the other, among them Germany and more recently the Netherlands, both citing a risk of irregular migration or cross-border crime. All countries have notified the EU Commission, but an analyst suggests the issue is more political than security related.
So it seems that more and more countries are actually using border controls. I don't know whether or how real the risk is and how effectively these border controls can actually respond to the reasons that are stated in the notifications. But I guess they are also serve as this tool to kind of say to the domestic public that we are doing something. Internal border controls may not be that invasive. Actually, they may be only like random checks at the border.
The Schengen Agreement was founded on the principles of strengthening external borders, allowing member states to trust one another. However, this trust has been challenged by some member states regarding migration issues. There is hope among some that implementing the Asylum and Migration Pact could rejuvenate the Schengen visa-free area.
A new business is booming in northern Nigeria, the mining for lithium. Fueled by its growing demand for making batteries for electric vehicles and phones, the new frontier is, however, coming with a steep cost. The methods are as primitive as they are dangerous. Miners wield axes to hack through rocks, descending several feet into dark pits.
Abin da ya sa ni wannan sana'a na shige ta da in rufa ma kaina asiri in dogara da sana'a na har in taimaka ma 'yan uwana da iyalaina da wasu ma daban.
The shadowy world of Nigeria's illegal artisanal mining thrives on informal networks of buyers and sellers operating with minimal government oversight.
Ai duk da manin mun san yana da dangerous, kowace sana'a tana da wancan. Wani tuki yake kuma shi ma din wannan mutuwa tana zuwa. Wani okada yake za a iya buge shi mutu. Mu ko mun san mai shiga rami ne, haka ne, dole ne wanda yake wannan ya san akwai wannan. Ba irin sana'ar da kaddara ba ta tadda shi.
A business for the poorest and most vulnerable. Local merchants say a team of 6 children can sort and bag up to 10-25 kilograms a day.
Su yaran leburorin sukan je wurare da yawa suna aiki. Suna aikin nan wani in ya zo iske suna aiki suna wahala su nemi abin da za su ci sai ya kore su. To, mu kuma da Allah ya sa muke da wurare da muka samu muka siya. Idan sun zo sun ga wani abu a filinmu cewa suna so sun ga abin da za su je su nemi abinci.
Lithium mining began here about a decade ago. The work here feeds the stock of Chinese businesses who dominate Nigeria's laxly regulated extractive industry.